Hey guys, I'm Tom at Chap, and I've got two of the brand spanking new Dell XPS laptops with me. One of them is OLED, the other is obviously not OLED, and that's what I'm going to test in this video. But to start, I want to see if you can actually tell the difference. So if I start by turning off all the backlights, close the blinds a little bit. So these are both the latest versions, as I say, the XPS 15 7590, the 2019 model, and one of these two is OLED. The other one is the traditional LCD. And I'm sure if you've been looking at buying this laptop, you've been weighing up whether you should go for the OLED screen or the traditional. So which do you think is the OLED? Laptop 1 or laptop 2? I'll give you a few seconds to vote in the poll at the top right, see if you're going to get it right. So of these two, the one with the OLED is this one. So this is the OLED, and you may agree with me that it looks a little bit more punchy, more vibrant, but actually there's an easier way of telling which one is the OLED and which one isn't, because unfortunately the OLED is not a touchscreen, which is a real shame because actually the OLED display on the Razer Blade 15 Advanced is a touchscreen. You get a touchscreen OLED, whereas the normal screen does still get that touchscreen display. So I'm not sure how useful that is to you, but it is a difference between them. Let's start with the viewing angles, and they're both very good actually. Although if we go to a more extreme acute angle, the brightness and the color of the OLED does fall away a bit more than the LCD, but there's not really a whole lot in it. You can see how the different screens cope with my bright light on top of the camera. The OLED does a little bit better in terms of reflections. It's not quite as bright or distracting as it is on the non-OLED, but what do you think? So by far the biggest advantage of OLED is the contrast ratio. Dell say it's 100,000 to 1 on the OLED, which is roughly 100 times more than the LCD. The result is you get much deeper blacks, and you can probably notice how the dark area around the white box on the LCD on the left has a brighter blue tint around it, whereas it's perfectly uniformly black on the OLED. But this really shows you what that higher contrast can do. It allows you to see more gradients between light and dark, so you get a much more precise looking picture. So I paused this YouTube video, and if you look at the bright area of the smoke at the top right, the OLED just seems to blend all the light and colors together better thanks to the smoother contrast gradients. Zooming in on the LCD, initially I thought this was a sort of banding look from the YouTube compression. But if I play the video, you can see it doesn't move at all, which it would if it was compression. And then if we move to the OLED, it's not there at all. Perfect blacks, higher contrast, smoother color gradients. When you really look close, it is quite a big difference. But what about brightness? Well, if I turn them both down to their lowest setting, you can see the OLED does get much darker. Back up to full, and you can see the LCD on the left is brighter. I measured a peak of 576 CDM on the LCD and 406 on the OLED. So on paper that is quite a big difference, but in reality it's not that obvious actually. One slightly weird issue is the LCD version of the XPS 15 comes with Dell's Premiere Color app pre-installed. It's a handy tool that allows you to switch between color profiles like sRGB, DCI-P3, etc. Bizarrely though, the OLED version doesn't have it, and it won't even allow me to install it. Hopefully an update can fix this, but it's a bit annoying. Now speaking of color, they are both impressively color accurate. 100% sRGB on both, over 99% Adobe RGB on both, but the main difference is DCI-P3. 92.8% on the LCD and 100% on the OLED. DCI-P3 generally covers more of the red spectrum than Adobe RGB, and as a result everything can look a little bit warmer in tone. The next question for me is battery life. These both have 97 watt-hour batteries, but apparently the OLED is not as good as the LCD when it comes to battery, or at least it depends on what you're doing. So with both laptops set to the same brightness and power saving mode on, I ran a 1 hour YouTube battery test, just running through my videos to see how much it would use by the end of it. So we started at 80%, and after 1 hour, we're down to 64% on both actually. It seems when you're watching YouTube videos, there's no difference in the battery performance between these laptops. Really, it's just that 4K resolution that sort of destroys your battery life. you'll get around 6 hours I found out of these. Okay, so that's all well and good, but there was an issue, a big issue with the OLED panel, and that's screen flickering. I couldn't work out how to fix it, but for the last couple of weeks, every time I've had a Google Doc or maybe like a Word document, something usually with like a white background and then black text, so maybe it was the contrast that was doing it, but it would flicker. You get these sort of micro split-second flickerings of the brightness, and it was so frustrating to the point where I was going to say it was a deal breaker, and you should, for that reason alone, not buy the OLED. But the good news is there's a really easy fix. All you have to do is jump into the Intel graphics control panel and disable panel self-refresh. That's literally it. That's all you have to do, and it completely fixes that screen flickering issue on the OLED panel. So that was a pretty long video talking about display technologies, but the big question, should you go for the LCD or the OLED on the new Dell XPS? Well, I was this close to saying you should completely disregard the OLED based on the screen flickering, but now we've fixed that, it's a bit of a closer fight. So the LCD is a little bit brighter, you get slightly better viewing angles, you get the Dell Premier Color app, which for some reason you don't on the OLED at the moment, and of course it is a touch screen, which may be important to you. For me, it's like a nice to have, but not essential. The OLED has significantly better contrast, it's got slightly more accurate DCI-P3 color, and it handles reflections a little bit better. But I think for me, as someone who spends their whole day watching or editing YouTube videos, I just can't unsee that difference in the gradients, the contrast that you get on the OLED. I'm watching and making videos all day long, so not having that, what look like banding or compression that you got on the LCD, it's so nice on the OLED. Even if there's a risk in a year or two, if I keep the same app open, there's gonna be burn-in. But I will let you know as I continue to use this going forward if I experience any of it. So for me, I'm going with the OLED, but you can't really go wrong with either. They're both fantastic screens and both incredible laptops. And I actually am working on my full review of the XPS 15. Make sure you do hit that like and subscribe button below and ding that little notification bell. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know what you think of the Dell and whether you go LCD or OLED in the comments. I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chap.